Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the studio for yet another episode in the portrait series. We are creeping towards the end here, and at this point there's not a whole lot left to add to the conversation and frankly to add to the sculpture. Now what that means is that we've reached the portion of the series where we will have to do a lot of busy work, essentially rendering form. Before we get to that though, let's talk about symmetry and structure. Symmetry means structure, of course. We've covered this extensively in this series already. I hope my point has come across about the importance of structure. Too often, students want to talk about all the asymmetries in the portrait, but ultimately, the head is more symmetrical than it is asymmetrical by far. As the work progresses, more and more of what we've done will become much clearer to us. Sometimes asymmetries are going to pop up, and while they'll feel annoying to have to deal with, it will be more annoying to see a finished casting with asymmetries we could have fixed in it. The major one that I'm dealing with here is going to be asymmetries in the eyes, namely depth asymmetries. One eye was sitting a bit deeper into the eye socket, and so we must bring it out to the same depth essentially as the other eye. The first order of business is then, of course, to decide which one we do. Do we bring one eye out, or do we push the other eye in to make them symmetrical? I will always prefer to push something outwards, as adding clay on top of already well-established information is much easier than attempting to retain said information as we dig backwards into the eye socket. Adding clay on top of an already established eyelid, an eyeball, simply means following what lays underneath, and frankly, this is pretty simple. In order to make the change, I retrace my steps, or retrace my process. I go back to where we began when attempting to place the eye and the lids in the first place. This of course means with a profile. Once I figure out how much the eye is to be brought outwards, I place a very narrow wall of clay along the middle of the eye. This includes the eyelids. Once this expansion seems to be in a reasonable place, and this does require some back and forth, I can expand the narrow wall of clay outwards from there, spreading the newly built depth outwards towards the outside and inside corners of the eye. There are multiple ways to look at such an adjustment needing to take place, of course. One way is that it's a problem that should be fixed, so essentially it's something that's annoying to us. Another way of thinking is thinking of it as an opportunity. For me, this depth asymmetry is a chance to improve the drawing of the eye itself, the volume present in the lids. Adjust the height of the eye as I expand it so it better fits the other eye, and even draw on a new iris that is going to be better suited to the other iris. The two eyes must work together after all. Look at changes that you need to make in your work as opportunities for improvements, and you'll be much better off and much less annoyed with yourself in your own work. I think sculpting is supposed to be a decent experience, so anything we can do and use to make that happen, we should attempt to employ. I run into issues with my work pretty much all the time. And I think no one is exempt from running into issues with their work. Every colleague and student I speak to mentions some terrible thing that they are dealing with in their work. This isn't working. That proportion is wrong. This looks bad. I can't come up with a good design for this part. Of course, these things that we're talking about here aren't truly terrible things, but we do get wrapped up in our work. Our emotions are closely attached to how the work is going. And so this is understandable. When you come across something like this in your own work, and trust me, you will, take a deep breath and step back. Observe, make a decision, and then execute that decision. Too often, I see students panic or perhaps turn their brains off completely in the face of challenges with no clear answers, and just work without thinking. And at that point, you're just digging your own grave deeper and deeper into the ground. Or sometimes they freeze and do nothing. So essentially they wait for the teacher to come tell them what to do. And I think neither of these are useful solutions. Retrace your steps and find out where things went off the rails. If something is wrong, go back to the basics to fix them. So often, our mistakes or the problems we find in our work are simple things. They are drawing mistakes. Like the one I attempted to fix here in the eye. It's a drawing mistake. And usually, they can be dealt with in the simple manner in which we built things in the first place. At this stage of the process, there is so much to do, and yet so little of it will truly appear on camera for you to see. Well, of course, it will appear. You will see me do the work, but what I'm doing will essentially seem like nothing is happening. That's because at this point, 80 to 90% of the clay is already there and in the right place. And the last 10 to 20% of clay takes a tremendous amount of time to place. It's placed so gradually and carefully that it will be really hard to notice these changes taking place. And that's kind of unfortunate. Because these changes, this last 10 to 20% of clay, it truly matters a lot, I think. I will show you some before and after photos here and there, so you can see what actually went down and how it actually improved the work. Because the work we are doing now is not simply work that smooths out the surface. That's an important thing to keep in mind, that this is not the case. And it's a big mistake to think that the work that we're doing in these later stages of the process are meant to smooth out the surface. That's not what we're doing here. However, more on that later. We have eyes right now with drawn on circles representing the iris and the pupil. While this is a decent place to leave it, we could actually leave it this way and call it finished, I tend to like to take things just a touch further. The eyes are one of those areas where, to a degree, we have to rely on sculpting the effect and not the actual thing that we are seeing. The iris and the pupil, of course, is a bulge on top of the eyeball, which is a sphere with a bulge on it. However, when we're looking at people's eye, that's not really what we see. That's not how they appear to us. Instead, we will here consider them much in the same way someone who is drawing them would. So we are going to consider value and effect over realistic representation.